Let's go. So in the last lesson, we were talking about something called completing the square. And there was a question which I was a bit like, what's going on here? I had a moment. So I just want to come back to that question and tell you, just show you kind of how it should be done. And also just to start with a bit of revision about completing the square. So what we did in the last lesson is we learned this process of completing the square. And what we did was we really focused on the number in front of the x, or the linear term, the term with the power of 1. And the process, what we learned is we can complete the square if we take that number, divide it by 2 and square it, and then we get a number. And in this case, it was 4. Then what we did was we added 4 to the original expression, and then we took 4 away again. Now, the effect of adding 4 and taking it away again is actually just 0. So this is still just the original expression, except you have now formed a perfect square trinomial over here, and then 5 minus 4 is just 1. And then all we need to do is worry about what goes inside this bracket over here. And so now we've taken this thing over here, and when we get to functions, we'll say this is in standard form, and this is called the alternate form. But basically, it's just applying this idea of completing the square. Now, I know students found this hard in the last lesson, so I want to take a moment to ask for questions about the example on the board. Or give me I know most students will probably be in the middle somewhere, but some students might still feel very confused. I want you to put your emoticon or your hands up or thumbs down or thumbs up, showing me how you feel about this example of completing the square. So the final answer, Naledi, is that the goal was to complete the square on this expression. That was basically what we spoke about in the last lesson. We were just learning that skill. Okay, let me go over this again, and I'll explain, because I think we do need this. We need a bit of repetition. So if you think about this thing over here, this expression is the one over here, okay? And this is not there's no bracket with a square there. There's no perfect square there. So, I suppose there's a square on the x, but incorporating the other variable. Now, what we need to do is the completing the square process has us focus on the number in front of the x, or the term with the power of 1, okay? Now, if I focus on that, that's minus 4. What is minus 4 divided by 2? Well, it's going to be minus 2. But we need to square that, and that gives us the magic number, which is 4. Okay, but now if we're going to add 4 to an expression and we want it to stay the same, we need to take it away again. So all we're doing is the 5, I move to the end. It's always there. But now what I'm doing is I'm adding 4, and I'm taking 4 away again. So now I've got this bit over here, x squared minus 4x plus 4, which is going to be gobbled up into something. And then what is 5 minus 4? It's just plus 1. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you're with me so far. Give me a thumbs down if I've lost you. And again, we can be honest. Remember this, that's what's quite nice about being online like this. We start to know each other. We feel like a family and a team, but we don't feel too stressed about showing our understanding. There's no, if you don't understand, you must speak up. Okay, now we have to, if you think about the trinomial idea, you can write it like this. And we spent some time in the last lesson doing this. But basically, or you can do it like this. Where did I get the 4 from? Okay, Tsipang, I took the number in front of the x and I divided it by 2 and I got minus 2. But then when I had minus 2, I squared that to get 4. So minus 2 times minus 2 is 4. Okay, and then, so just to show you what I was doing here, if you factorize that, this would be x minus 2 times x minus 2, but we could actually we always know it's going to end up being a perfect square because that's the way the process is designed. And so this is the same as x minus 2 squared plus 1. Okay. So if you are still feeling confused, what I want you to do is I want you to rewatch this part of the recording and then go from there. Okay, but now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to move into solving equations using completing the square. Now, this would not be my first choice, right? This would not be my first choice, but sometimes a question, they may force you to solve a question by completing the square. So I'm going to show you how we can do that. Okay, so at the moment, if you actually, no, let's actually do it with this one. Let's do this. So we're going to solve this by completing the square. Now, completing the square always focuses on these two parts here. And it's almost like this gets in the way. What should I do with the minus 12 if I want to get it out the way and move it to the other side? Who can tell me in the chat or by raising their hand, what should I do to get rid of that part there? And I want you to tell me in the chat there. So in the chat, divide by 2. We could, I think what we should do is we move this to the other side. So we add 12 on both sides and we get 12. So now the 12 is out of action, right? It was not out of action, but it's been moved to the other side. Now this is a little bit different. But the reason is the 12 gets in the way. It confuses us a little bit. And so when we're solving an equation by completing the square, the very first thing we should check is that there's a 1 in front. But luckily in this question, there is a 1. Now, it's no longer an expression. An expression would just be that side, right? That bit is the expression. And if I was saying simplify or complete the square on the expression, that's one thing. In this case, the goal is to solve for x. So I actually have to do something, but I have to use the completing the square. Now, whenever we do completing the square, we have to add something and then take it away, or in this case, we add it to both sides. What is the number I want to add in order to complete the square here? I want someone to come online and tell me what to do to complete the square. Okay. Bukle, what do you think we should do here? Where would your thinking go to?
So in our last lesson, so we said we look at the middle term. In this
Yeah.
case, the middle term is 6.
Okay.
And we divide that middle term by 2 and
Okay.
square it. So 6
Okay.
divided by 2 is 3, and
Okay.
that squared is 9. So we
Okay.
would
So
add
9 is the
9.
magic number. Yeah. Okay. Add 9. And
We
then
would
what
add
do I
9,
do
but we
with
would
that?
also subtract 9.
Okay. Now, this is where, so you're perfect. You're absolutely perfect. And I even love that you said subtract 9. Now, when we are solving an equation, because we have two sides, instead of taking away 9 again, what we do, Bukle, is we add 9 to this side. Does that make sense in terms of your knowledge of equations? Like if you do the same thing to both sides, it stays equal?
Oh, yes.
I have changed it because before, like in the earlier one, we would add, I can even go back here, we would add 4 and take it away again. But can you see that was just an expression? It wasn't an equation.
Oh,
So there
an
is a slight
equation.
difference. But what I love about your question is you've helped everyone in the class because you can see clearly the difference. And that's why I love questions, because you've really helped us. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. So now what I want everyone to do is we have completed the square, or we're trying to complete the square. I want you to write down what you think goes on this side and what you think goes on that side. And then when you're done, I want you to say done in the chat. Okay. Ooh, I like it, Naledi. I like it. Well, who else has something coming in? Okay, so let's have a look here. We know that this is going to be a perfect square. Oh, sorry, guys. So actually, let me even do the side, the easier side first. This is going to be 21, and this is going to be something squared. Okay. Now, the question is, what goes inside here? What goes inside the squared bracket based on the pattern we've been learning about so far? Okay, so I think there has to be an X and I has to be, now how do I know it's a plus? Well, I can just look at this side over here. And then I know, remember in the beginning when I was doing this, I went 6 divided by 2. Now it's the number inside the bracket that will always go here. Okay, so we've done the hard work. We know x plus 3 squared is 21, but now I want to solve for x. Now, the problem with solving for x is the square over here is locking everything up. What undoes squaring something? What undoes squaring something?
Root.
Yes, the root. Was that Lanico? I feel like I recognized your voice, Lanico.
Zero snack or so.
So Narco, almost. Okay, I was close. So Narco, you are very confident and you are very right. So I'm going to do that. But now, Saniko, can you help me? What I feel a bit like maybe I've unbalanced the world. Can you help me balance it?
So you're gonna cancel the root of the squared, and you're
I
gonna
know,
get
but
the
it's
x.
but
Oh,
the
so
problem is though, square root
what
on
you
the
do
left
on this
side
side,
is making me worried.
do on the other side. What you do on this side, you do on the other side, sir.
Yes. And remember, it's plus minus as well. Okay. So I heard something else. You said something about canceling. What's going to get canceled out?
This the roots and the squared, sir.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to end up with x plus 3 equals plus minus the square root of 21. Now, if you look in your calculator, okay, wait, let me do this. What's the final thing I need to do to get x by itself?
So don't you take the 3 to the other side?
Yeah, exactly. So you move the 3 across, so you have the 3, and so what you're going to get is x is plus or minus the square root of 21. But remember, you take away 3 from both sides, so that is a big minus 3. Now, that is going to give you 2 decimal answers, and I want everyone to put that in your calculator and see what you get. So you get x plus square root 21 minus 3, and I want everyone to put the answers in the chat, and then we are going to do our own question together now. Okay, and the lady's got an answer on the move, which is great. What else have we got? Who else has an answer in there? Do you agree with Naledi? Do you disagree? Bukle agrees. And Naledi, that's your other route. Okay. So far, and I want to see other people answering in the chat. Nicole has answered. That's fantastic. 1.58. So we know the one answer is going to be 1.58. And the other one is going to be negative 7.58. Now, what's interesting is that the answers are decimal and messy. Now, that's because that there was a a surd involved. But the good news is this method will solve any quadratic equation. But if given a choice, you would normally use something called the quadratic formula, which I'm going to teach you about. But if they say you have to do it by completing the square, then you would use this method. Okay, now I want a chance for you guys to fly solo. So I need to give you a question to do by yourself, and I want you to try and use completing the square. So let me try and zoom in. So the question I'm going to ask you to try and do by completing the square is going to be this one. And I want you to see how far you can get, remembering the steps. And if you get stuck, I want you to ask questions in the chat or raise your hand. Okay.
Does sir want us to solve for x also, or should we just complete the square?
No. So you must solve for x as well. So each of these, solve each of the equations below using completing the square. And I want you to start in the first one that we gave you. We started by dealing with the constant term. So that's my hint to get you moving. What's my first step going to be? And then we go from there. So step one is definitely to move the 8 to the other side, and it becomes -8. So now the question is, what do we need to add to both sides to complete the square? And if you're feeling generous, pop what you think the number we need to add to both sides is in the chat. So we focus on the 6. Well, thank you, Naledi. You're very generous. So is Nicole. So it looks like 9 is the number that will complete the square. And so I'm adding 9 here, and I'm adding 9 there. Now see if you can write down the next step, which is filling in what is here and filling in what is here. And then if you're feeling very on top of the world, see if you can get the final answer for x. So -8 plus 9 is 1. So that's that side. And then on this side, I know I'm completing the square, so there has to be a perfect square. I know there's going to be an x because this is about x. I know there's a plus because of here, and I know there's that. Now, the problem I have is I need to get rid of the square. So I square root this side, and I square root that side. And so I get, what do I get x plus 3 equals plus or minus 1. Oh, but the square root of 1 is just 1. So what are my final answers going to be in the chat? Okay. There you go. Let me know in the chat. So when I bring, it's plus or minus 1 here, so be careful. So the one answer is going to be 1 minus 3, and the other answer is going to be -1 minus 3. So x is -2 or x is -4. Give me a thumbs up if you followed that. Give me a thumbs down if you didn't. I just want to get a feel for how the group is feeling. I'd love to squeeze in one. Okay, fantastic. Before we have our break, we're going to squeeze in one more question. I want you to solve for x by completing the square for that equation. So solve for x by using the method of completing the square.
Oh, I don't need to.
Okay. You can do it. Think about what are the steps you need to follow. So step one, move the 45 across. What is the number that I need to add to both sides to complete the square? So I take -4, I divide it by 2, and then I square it. And that's -2 squared, so that's 4. So I just add 4, and I add 4. Now, we know this is 49, and we want to know what goes in the squared bracket. So I know it's going to be an x. Now, what I have to watch out for is that there's a minus sign here, which means this has to be a minus sign. And then if I think about this, this is going to be 2. Or, yeah, so it's the -2 from inside the bracket there. Okay, now I have to get my answers. So pop your answers in the chat if you've got them. We know we're just basically going to square root both sides. And when we do that, we are going to get the square root of 49. But the answers to that, well, let me put it in just in case. So I do that, and I get that. And then here I'm going to get plus or minus 7. So now, what is my final answer going to be? It's going to be x equals 7 plus 2, or it is going to be minus 7 plus 2. Because remember, there's a plus 7, which is the first one, and then I plus 2, and there's a minus 7 is plus 2. The plus 2 is coming from the minus 2, which has to go to the other side. And then my answer is going to be x is 9, or x is, sorry, I left something out here. I should have said x equals, minus 7 plus 2 is minus 5. And so my final answer is going to be x is 9, or x is minus 5. All right, we have worked hard, but we have made good progress. And so you know my motto, you've got to take care of your brain if you want it to take care of you. And so I want you to stand up, turn on your cameras, and join me in a bit of exercise so that we can be productive in our second half of our session today. Okay. Turn on your cameras, and I'm going to then stop sharing my screen, and you're going to stand up. All right. Oh, I can definitely feel like my legs are happy to be standing, and my brain has had a workout, which is good. And let's just start with some deep breaths. So we stand, sort of just hips and loose, relax, and let's breathe. Breathe in. Breathe out. One more deep breath. Okay, then get your arm nice and loose. Shake it around like it's hardly attached. Shake around this arm. You want it to be nice and loose. Shake around your leg. Shake around the other leg. Just shake everything that you can. You want your body to feel so relaxed and just be like, oh, I'm on the beach or wherever it is that you go to relax. And then let's roll our shoulders. So just gently roll your shoulders back. If you feel your shoulders are tense, just relax them. Then roll your shoulders forward. And then shake out your arms again. Shake out your legs. Okay, then arms to the side, small little circles. Small little circles, small little circles. Change direction, change direction. Oh, I can feel my shoulder muscles at the back, or my triceps are enjoying this. Okay, so we've got some oxygen. We're nice and relaxed. Now we need some blood flow. And we're going to do jumping jacks because it's just, those are the best at that. We're going to do 15 and we start in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I feel like my body has been reset, which is awesome. And what I want you to do is, while you are recovering and your heart rate is coming down, I want to see, can you solve that puzzle? Can you solve that puzzle? Okay, what do we think? Who feels like they know what this is? Now, I'll give you a hint. BODMAS is important. BODMAS, the order of operations is important. And so you need to think about what gets done first. What do we think gets done first? Well, I remember that division is kind of a big deal compared to subtraction. And so what I would say, oh, but wait, that's also a division over here. Okay, but I would do is I would rewrite this as 9 minus 3 divided by 1/3 plus 2. What do we think is the answer for that one? See if you can put the answer in the chat there. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to say, everyone loves a good fraction question. The first thing we have to do is, if we're dividing by a fraction, it's the same as tipping it over and timesing. So what we have then is we have 9 minus 9 plus 2, and 9 minus 9 plus 2 is just going to be 2. And so that is the answer. Okay. Awesome. Let's get back to the rest of our lesson. So the rest of this lesson is going to say, look, you've learned how to solve an equation by completing the square, but there are other ways of solving a quadratic equation. And so we're going to try out different methods together. And I'm going to say, okay, for this one, do it with factorizing for this one, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the formula, which is coming up in our next lesson. Okay, I want you to solve this quadratic equation using factorizing. Go ahead and use factorizing to solve this quadratic equation. And then put your answers in the chat when you are done. So this is going back to like lesson 1 and 2, but let's just see. I'm going to show you how the different methods can be used. Okay, yeah, we're solving for x. Sorry, I should have put that in the actual. So in all these questions, we are solving for x, and these are quadratic equations. And the reason they're quadratic equations is the power of 2 that's here. So this is called a trinomial. And to factorize a trinomial, there's different ways. Some of you might go straight to the brackets. I like to do this little thing where I say, what's the middle term? It's plus 5. What two numbers multiply together to give me 1? And if you don't understand how to do this, you can look at earlier videos where I go through it a bit. Then I say, what are the numbers that multiply together to give me 4? It's 4 and 1. And then all I do is I check. If I make that a plus, 1 times plus 4 is plus 4. 1 times plus 1 is plus 1. Together, those two give me that, which is great. And then I read it off horizontally and I go, if there's a 1 there, it's 1x plus 4 or x plus 4. And here it's going to be x plus 1. And then over here we have 0. And then we know, well, if this times this is 0, then x plus 4 is 0 or x plus 1 is 0. And therefore the answers will be x minus 4 or x is minus 1. That is solving a quadratic equation using factorizing. Notice how it's different to completing the square, even though completing the square would have worked as well. And just to show you, in fact, I'm not going to do that now. I want you to practice some other types. So let me ask you, if you've done that one, great. If you feel unsure, I want you to raise your hand and ask a question. But while you do that, I want the rest of us to try and solve this quadratic equation by factorizing. Oh, Sanako raised the hand. Okay, let's go to Sanako. So what is your question, Sanako?
So sir, how will we know whether to use factorizing or the method that you showed us
Okay,
previously?
that's a very good question. Now, the majority of the time, so everyone is different. There's no perfect way to do this. If the question says you must do it by this method, you do it by this method. Okay, so if the teacher says you must do it like this, you do it like that. I think for most people, after you learn how the formula works, you probably will, if you're given a choice, use the formula. But it depends on the situation. Different methods have different advantages, and it is good for you to be aware of how to do all three of them. But if I'm honest, I think in the end, most people will go back to the formula. But it is important you see all the methods and just have some understanding of them. Okay.
Listen.
Cool. Okay, so let's see if we can factorize this one. I think, what are we going to get for our answers for this quadratic equation? I think 3 and 4 are going to be involved. And there's going to be a +4 and a -3, I think. So that would give me -3, that would give me +4, that's fine. So I get equals 0. X minus 3, x plus 4. Now, what does that mean about my final answers? So if we do the split where we say, look, x minus 3 must equal to 0, or x plus 4 must equal to 0. Basically, what we're saying is, if we know that this one bracket is 0, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's a nice contrast. If we know that one of these brackets is 0, it doesn't matter what the other bracket is. 0 times anything is 0, therefore it's an answer. And we can see there that basically the answer here will be x is 3 because it makes the yellow bracket 0. The same idea will work for the other one, except x will be -4. Give me a thumbs up if you follow how to solve a quadratic equation by factorization. Give me a thumbs down if you don't, because if we mostly follow this, I will briefly outline the third and final method that we use to solve quadratics. Okay, so if we talk about a quadratic equation, if you want to, you can use something called the formula, okay? And I actually have, let me look at this next question and I'll do the formula for you. Now, let's put this in here. Let me move it down. Okay, so this is a quadratic equation, and I could say to you, can you solve for x? So let me do that the way that I've been telling you so far. I'm going to factorize this, and because I've done lots of trinomials in my life, I know off the top of my head that this will factorize into that. And so the answer for this will be x equals 4 or x equals 3. Okay, awesome. But there is a formula that will give you the answer to this by just putting the formula in. But the formula depends on what's called the standard form of a quadratic equation. And the standard form of a quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where the number in front of the x squared is the a, the number in front of the x is the b, the number in front of the c is, or the constant term is the c. I want you to look at this equation over here and tell me what is a, b, and c in the one that I've highlighted yellow. And I want you to put that in the chat. Okay, so if I look at my question, I see that A is 1, B is -7, and C is equal to 12. Yeah, okay, now, this is where this magic formula comes along. And the way that we get this magic formula is by taking the standard form of a quadratic equation and completing the square, that skill that you learned before. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to give you the magic formula. So the magic formula is minus b plus minus big long square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. What a mouthful, hey? So that is the formula. Give me a thumbs up if you've seen that formula before. Give me a thumbs down if you've never seen that formula. Okay. So all you have to do in the formula, it's not so bad, is if you look at those numbers, right? I'm going to put them, and sometimes I even put brackets there. So just to be very safe, let me do that. So where there's a B, I'm going to put a bracket. Where there is another B, I'm going to put a bracket. The 4 is a constant. That's a space. That's a space. And then here, it's 2 times that's a space. Now, you may say, oh, why are there so many brackets? I say it's taking insurance, right? And all I know is I need to put a number in there. So what is my number? Well, B is -7. So I've got that. Oh, I left off my squared. Sorry, that was me having a moment. This is -7. Now, what was here? That was A. So A was 1. C was 12. And then 2 times A, what was A? A was 1. Okay, so this is how the formula works. So now, last bit. I want to know what is -7. It's actually just going to be 7. Plus minus something inside there, and then the bottom is 2. Can you guys help me and work out what is this value of the thing inside the square root bracket? Let me know in the chat what you think it is. If I follow the logic, that should be 49, and this should be -4 times 1 times 12. I think that is -48. So be careful here, because when you square the -7, you get 49. And then when you've got -4 times 1 times 12, you actually end up with x is 7 plus minus 1 over 2. All right, but I still need to get my final answer here. So 7 plus square root 1 over 2 is the one answer, or x is, oh, sorry, that was a bit much. Or, I think I'm zooming around too much here. X is 7 minus square root 1 over 2. What are my final answers going to be for this using the formula? What are my final answers going to be here? So 7 plus 1 over 2, that's just 8 over 2, which is 4. And here the square root of 1 is 1, so 7 minus 1 is 6. 6 over 2 is 3. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have very good news for me and for you. X is 4 and X is 3 sounds very, very familiar. So if you go back to the original part of the question, can you see that I told you X is 4 and X is 3? So the good news is both the factorizing method and the formula method give us the same answers. So at least the world is consistent. Now, some people will say the formula takes longer to do. So with very easy quadratic equations, the factorizing is quicker, and so people will do that. But for harder quadratic equations, or if you aren't very confident with factorizing, then the formula is guaranteed to give you the answer if you do it correctly. Now, in the next lesson, I'm going to spend most of the lesson working on how to solve quadratics with the formula. And so that's what we're going to practice in the next lesson. But